Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
Everything school taught you about learning was wrong. Not wrong in the way that makes teachers bad people or education a conspiracy. Wrong in the way that a tool built for one job is wrong when you try to use it for a different job. School was built to produce people who could pass tests. Passing a test requires holding information in your head long enough to pour it onto a page. Once the page is filled, the brain releases the information because the brain is practical and the information has served its purpose. This is why you cannot remember most of what you studied. You were never supposed to remember it. You were supposed to reproduce it once under exam conditions and move on. Real learning is completely different. Real learning is what happens when information gets used immediately in a real situation that demands it. The brain keeps what it uses and releases what it does not. School almost never required you to use anything in a real situation, so almost nothing stuck. That is not your fault. It is the design. But now that you can see the design, you can stop following it. The moment you understand that real learning comes from doing rather than studying, your whole relationship with knowledge changes. You stop trying to fill your head before you start. You stop waiting until you know enough to begin. You stop treating the studying as the main event and the doing as something that happens after. The doing becomes the main event immediately. The studying becomes something you do in service of the doing when the doing hits a wall and needs a specific piece of information to get past it. This sounds simple, and it is simple, but simple is not the same as easy to actually do, because everything in your education history is pulling you in the opposite direction. Every year of school trained you to prepare before you perform, to study before you act, to know before you do. Unlearning that sequence is the mental shift that changes everything. The new sequence is do first, hit a wall, learn only what you need to get past the wall, do again. That cycle builds real capability faster than anything else available to you. Think about the last time you actually learned something that stayed with you. Really stayed. Not the night before the exam, but months later, when it came up in real life, and you still had it. There is a very good chance it came from a real experience rather than a classroom. The thing you learned by doing it wrong the first time and figuring out what went wrong. The skill you picked up because the situation demanded it, and there was no time to study before jumping in. The knowledge that stuck because it solved a real problem in the moment you needed it solved. This is not coincidence. This is how the brain is designed to work. It prioritizes information that proved useful in a real moment over information that was consumed without a real application. Every genuine learner across history figured this out eventually. The ones who built real skills did not read about the skill for 6 months before touching it. They touched it immediately, and read only when the touching produced a question that the reading could answer. The bare minimum principle will feel wrong before it feels right. Your instinct, trained by years of school, will tell you that you are not ready, that you need more background, that skipping the foundational material is irresponsible and will produce gaps that cost you later, and occasionally that instinct is right. Some skills genuinely require a minimum of foundational knowledge before any real application is possible. But the foundational minimum is almost always much smaller than the amount of material your anxiety wants to consume before it feels ready to begin. The test is simple. Ask, what is the smallest amount I need to know to take the first real step on an actual project? Find that amount. Learn it. Take the step. Stop there and do not touch anything else until the step produces the next question. The next question tells you exactly what to learn next. This is the opposite of the school model, which decided in advance what you needed to know and taught it to you in a sequence designed for the average student rather than for you and your specific project and your specific next question. The project is the frame that makes all of this work, and without it, the bare minimum approach has nothing to be bare minimum for. The project is the real thing you are building toward a real outcome that will exist in the real world when it is finished. Not a practice run, not a simulation, not a set of exercises designed to prepare you for the project you will eventually do. The actual thing. The song you are going to finish and put out. The app you are going to build and ship. The body you are going to build through a real training program that runs for real months with real measurements. The business you are going to start with a real product and a real first customer. The project makes the learning real because every question the project generates is a real question with a real answer that gets applied immediately to a real thing. That chain of real is what makes the knowledge stick. Remove any link in that chain, and you are back in theory land, where the information floats free of any application and evaporates before it can become capability. Most young men get stuck in what people who study learning call tutorial hell. Tutorial hell is the loop of consuming learning content about a skill without ever building anything real with the skill. The second step is to experiment. You do not know what you are capable of yet. This is not an inspirational statement. It is a literal fact about the current state of your self-knowledge. The version of yourself that exists right now has only been tested against the experiences you have already had. Every experience you have not yet had contains an unknown quantity of potential that could be enormous or modest, but cannot be known without the test. The singer who never sang in front of another person does not know they are a singer. They may have the raw material of something extraordinary sitting completely dormant because the experiment was never run. The programmer who was told early that they were not a technical person may have a mind built for the elegant logic of code that has never been given the chance to discover itself. The boxer who has spent their life in a body that was never tested against the specific demands of the sport may have exactly the physical intelligence and mental toughness that the sport rewards most. None of these possibilities are accessible without the experiment, and the experiment is not available without the willingness to be bad at something in public until the potential reveals itself or does not. Experimentation is the mechanism through which every major human discovery was made, and the mechanism through which every individual human life finds its direction. The scientist who refuses to run the experiment because the result might not confirm the hypothesis never discovers anything. The scientist who runs the experiment and receives a result that contradicts the hypothesis has learned something real that changes the next experiment and the one after that. Your life is the laboratory, and the experiments are the things you try with genuine commitment for long enough to receive a real result. 6 months of genuine committed practice is a real experiment. A week of casual interest followed by retreat when the difficulty arrives is not an experiment. It is a visit. Visits do not produce data, they produce impressions. And impressions are not sufficient to tell you whether a skill has the potential to become something real in your particular hands. The experiment requires enough time that the initial awkwardness gives way to some level of real engagement with the subject. That transition takes months, not days, and the results that emerge after it are real in a way that the impressions from the first week never were. The reason most people never run the experiments is that failure has been so thoroughly associated with judgment about the person failing that the experiment feels like a referendum on the self rather than a test of a specific activity in specific conditions. School did this. The failed test was not a data point about what needed more attention. It was a grade that went on a permanent record that shaped how you and everyone around you understood your capability. This association between failure and judgment does not disappear when school ends. It follows the person into every new attempt and produces the specific hesitation that keeps the experiment from being run. What if I try this and discover I am not good at it? The answer to that question is always the same. Then you will have learned something real about where your time is better spent, and you will have developed some small amount of the skill in the process, and you will run the next experiment with better information than you had before. Failure is the signal that redirects the experiment. It is the most useful result available because it points clearly in the direction of what comes next. The 3 interests exercise is simple, and the simplicity is the point. Sit with yourself in a quiet space, without the phone, and without the noise of other people's opinions about what you should be interested in. Let the question sit. What do I actually find myself drawn toward when no one is assigning the direction? Not what sounds impressive or what seems practical or what the people around you have decided is reasonable. What actually pulls your attention when nothing is pulling it toward anything? Write down 3 things. They do not need to be connected. They do not need to be immediately monetizable. They do not need to make sense as a coherent life direction at this point. They just need to be genuinely yours. The person who cannot identify 3 genuine interests after honest reflection has been living so thoroughly inside other people's agendas that the connection to their own curiosity has been buried under years of accumulated external direction. If that is the case, the exercise becomes even more important, because the reconnection with genuine curiosity is the prerequisite for everything that follows. 6 months is not an arbitrary number. It is the minimum time required for the initial phase of any new skill to pass and for something real about the person's relationship with that skill to become visible. The first month of any new skill is dominated by the experience of incompetence. Everything is unfamiliar. The gap between what you are producing and what you can see is possible is at its widest. The feedback is mostly negative in the form of results that do not match the intention. This phase is not informative about the ultimate potential. It is informative only about the current distance from the starting point. The 2nd and 3rd months begin to show whether the initial incompetence is giving way to some form of developing pattern recognition. By the 4th and 5th months, there is enough accumulated practice to reveal whether the learning curve is responding to the effort or staying stubbornly flat. By the 6th month, there is a real result from a real experiment that tells you something genuine about the relationship between this skill and this particular person. Less than 6 months, and the result is too contaminated by the initial learning phase to be trusted as a verdict. The skill attached to the interest is the practical target of the experiment. Interest without the specific skill pursuit is still in theory land. The person who is interested in music but never picks up an instrument or sits down at a keyboard and begins the difficult process of learning to make the sounds they hear in their mind has an interest, not an experiment. The experiment begins when the specific skill is identified, and the daily practice of that skill begins regardless of how bad the initial results are. The singer identifies the specific skills of vocal technique and begins the practice. The boxer identifies the specific skills of footwork and combinations and begins the training. The programmer identifies the specific language and the specific first project and begins writing the code. Each of these is the experiment in its real form. The interest told you where to look. The skill practice is the looking. 6 months of the looking produces a result that no amount of thinking about the interest could have produced. The result tells you what to do next. The person who runs 3 experiments across 18 months emerges from that period as a categorically different person from the one who entered it. You have no excuse left. Look around you. The phone in your hand has more power in it than entire governments had 50 years ago. You can learn anything on it. You can reach anyone through it. You can build something real with it starting today. And yet most young men are using that same phone to scroll through other people's lives, feeling worse about their own. That is not a technology problem. That is a direction problem. You do not have a direction, and without a direction, the most powerful tools ever built just become the most powerful ways ever invented to waste time. The first thing you need to understand is that the era you were born into is genuinely different from every era before it. The barriers that stopped your grandfather from building the life he wanted were real and external. The barriers stopping you are almost entirely internal. That is not an insult. It is the most freeing thing anyone can tell you. Because internal barriers can be broken. You are the one holding them up. Nobody is coming to hand you a path. This is the thing that takes the longest to accept and costs the most while it is being avoided. School suggested that following the steps would lead somewhere worth going. Get the grades, get the degree, get the job. And for a lot of young men, the steps led somewhere, but not somewhere they actually wanted to be. Somewhere that looked okay from the outside and felt hollow from the inside. And now you are standing in that hollow place wondering what happened and why nobody told you this was how it would feel. Nobody told you because most of the people giving advice are also inside lives they chose by default rather than by design. They are not lying to you. They genuinely do not know another way because they never looked for one. But the other way exists. It has always existed. And right now, with the tools available to you, it is more accessible than it has ever been for any generation of young men in history. The path does not get handed to you. You build it. And you start building it by asking one simple question every single day. The question is this: does what I am about to do right now get me closer to the life I actually want? That is it. That is the whole filter. You do not need a complicated system or a productivity app or a morning routine with 17 steps. You need that one question asked honestly before every significant choice in the day. Before you open the phone, ask it. Before you say yes to something, ask it. Before you spend the next 2 hours doing something, ask it. The answer will often be no, and that is the point. The no is not a judgment. It is a redirect. It is the moment where the day stops being something that happens to you and starts being something you are steering. Most young men never steer. They drift from one thing that feels okay to the next thing that feels okay and wonder at the end of the day why nothing feels like it is moving. Nothing is moving because drifting does not move anything. The filter moves things. Use it every single day without exception. The internet gave you something that young men in every previous generation would have given almost anything to have. Free access to the knowledge of the best people in the world in almost every field that exists. The young man in 1970 who wanted to learn about business had to know someone who knew something, or find a book in a library that might or might not have what he needed. The young man today types a question and gets the answer in seconds from someone who spent decades learning it. This is not a small thing. This is a genuinely enormous thing that has been made to feel ordinary through familiarity. The access is extraordinary. What is being done with it is not. The same device that holds every lesson ever documented about building a skill or starting a business or getting healthy or understanding money is being used primarily to watch other people live. The access is there. The decision to use it differently is the only thing standing between where you are and where you want to be. Social media gets treated like a toy, but it is a tool, and the difference between those two things in your hands right now is enormous. As a toy, it gives you the feeling of connection without the substance of it. It gives you entertainment and comparison and the slow erosion of your sense of what is possible for you as you watch a curated version of other people's best moments on repeat. As a tool, it gives you the ability to show your work to the world and build an audience around what you know and what you are learning and what you are building. Every person you look up to who built something using social media started with 0 followers and 1 piece of content that almost nobody saw. They are not special. They were consistent. They showed up and put something real out into the world repeatedly for long enough that the platform rewarded the consistency with reach, and the reach compounded into something that changed their life. That path is open to you right now today. The only requirement is that you start before you feel ready and continue after the early results disappoint you. Artificial intelligence right now is doing something to the gap between one person and what they can produce that has never happened before in history. A young man with a real skill and a clear direction and the willingness to learn how to use these tools can produce what a small team produced 5 years ago. The design work, the written content, the code, the research, the planning, all of it can be assisted to a degree that makes the single committed person more powerful than they have ever been relative to larger, slower moving operations. This is not about replacing your effort with a machine. It is about removing the parts of the work that previously stopped you from getting to the parts only you can do. The judgment is yours. The vision is yours. The genuine skill at the center of the work is yours. The tools handle the surrounding friction that used to make the whole thing feel too big for one person. You are not too small for the goal. The tools closed the gap. Step through it. The fact that you are lost right now is not a permanent condition. It is a phase, and it is a phase that ends the moment you make one real decision and follow it with one real action. Fall in love with the plateau. Nobody tells you about the plateau when you are young. They show you the highlights. The moment the person crossed the finish line. The day the business made its first million. The night the fighter won the belt. They show you the peak and cut the footage of everything between the starting point and the peak, because the in between is not dramatic enough to hold attention. So you grow up with a picture of success that is made entirely of peaks and none of the long flat stretches of ordinary daily work that produced them. Then you start building something real and you hit the plateau, and nothing in what you were shown prepared you for how long it lasts or how normal it feels from the inside, or how easy it is to mistake the flatness for nothing is working. The plateau is not a sign that you chose the wrong path. It is the path. The peaks are just the moments where enough accumulated plateau work becomes visible all at once. They do not last. The plateau always returns. And the person who cannot make peace with that will spend their whole life running from the only place where real development actually happens.